Welcome to Curious and Unqualified, a podcast about life in academia. I'm Eric Edlund, professor of physics.
I'm Jeremy Jimenez, professor in the Foundations and Social Advocacy Department, and it is my great honor to introduce our first student guests, two former students of mine. If you would please introduce yourselves by telling us your name, your degree, and your graduation year, and then we'll get right to it.
Hi, Adrienne Newcomb. I graduated in 2022 with a master's in literacy.
Hi, I'm Jacqueline Trapani. I graduated in 2024 with my bachelor's in English, and I'm going for my master's in teaching.
All right, so tell us a little bit about your undergraduate experience.
My undergrad experience was kind of a modge podge of things. I started off at SUNY Plattsburgh and then went to OCC, and then I landed at SUNY Cortland. I liked it. I think the best at OCC just because it was smaller classes and I feel like I could connect more, both with my professors and with my peers. SUNY Cortland was good, but I didn't have a typical college experience. I lived at home. I worked full-time, but I did like to take classes that were more geared towards what I actually wanted to study and what I was interested in, because I think that a lot of my first 2 years of college was, statistics and biology and things that I've never used again.
What were the differences between two colleges? Like, how did you find Plattsburgh compared to Cortland? Pros and cons?
I think, to start off too, at Plattsburgh I was a different major. I wasn't education. I was speech-language pathology, which was sort of a push from my family because they thought it was going to make more money, right? And I know with teaching you're not in it for the money. But I think that it was smaller classes there, and I guess because I wasn't super invested in what I was going for, that I didn't really try as much. I take a lot of pride in my education, my grades, but it was a big transition and jump from that was the first time I didn't live at home and try to manage classes, money, a job, all of that stuff. It was a challenge, but SUNY Cortland kind of gave me a foundation, not just for managing my classes, but time management as well too, and connections I found there that I've kept since. And Plattsburgh, I couldn't really say the same. It just didn't mesh well.
I got my undergrad at SUNY Cortland, and I'm now in my grad program at SUNY Cortland. My undergrad experience, I did love once I finally started doing what I wanted to do and what I was passionate about, like Adrienne was saying. The gen eds definitely did not do me, my GPA, any favors, but that's okay. But other than that, the department that I was a part of was amazing, and they still are, and I did love it when I was doing what I loved.
I want to jump in here with a question. I think professors and students alike have different opinions about the value and usefulness of general education. So you just mentioned that it was kind of a hurdle for you and it wasn't really terribly enjoyable. Looking back on it, can you see a way that it could have been enjoyable? Was it just a matter of choosing the right classes and you made poor choices, or is it the overall structure of the gen ed program just you think doesn't work particularly well?
I do think that gen eds are important. I wouldn't argue against them, but personally, I'm not a science person, and I needed to take bio and a bio lab, and I got C's in both of them, and the rest of my classes I got A's in. So, of course, as an English major, science is not my number one thing, but I do think it's important that I take those classes, and I should have done better in them than I did, but
But would you say that what you're expressing here is a matter of the overall structure, and would you like something that gave you more freedom with a general education, or would you say that part of it worked pretty well for you and it was really, your issue was kind of really localized to the science aspect of it?
Yeah, I think my issue is definitely localized in the science aspect of it. It is what it is. I took the classes. I did what I did with them. Would I have preferred to take not those classes and something that was more centralized to what I enjoy? Yeah, but I also understand why they're needed.
Yeah, I think that goes both ways,
yeah.
Right? Sometimes we're forced into taking courses that aren't exactly in our wheelhouse, but maybe there's a growth experience in that nonetheless.
Yeah, as an English major, I love reading. I don't love grammar, but it's needed regardless, so.
And Adrienne, how about you? How's your gen ed compared to the rest of your major courses?
I mean, I got to take some pretty interesting classes, like cultural anthropology was a big hit for me. It was interesting. It was something that I wouldn't have had access to, you know, in high school. But yeah, the science, right? I've never used that. I mean, maybe I can help students with homework sometimes, but I'm not using that in my day-to-day life. And truthfully, I think it's kind of a waste for me to have to take a class like that. I mean, I do agree that they do teach us something, right? You take something out of it no matter what. But if I could go back, I would rather have classes geared toward my major and specific things to help me grow in that aspect. I don't really think a biology class is necessarily helping me get to where I want to get to.
So one of the arguments that people make about gen ed classes, we could take the science aspect in particular, is that to be a citizen in the modern world, it's important to know something about science, right? Science comes up all the time in policy discussions, in politics, whether we want to devote our taxes to installing a new solar power installation or issues with vaccines, all sorts of things come up. So in that sense, do you think that science courses, even though it wasn't particularly enjoyable, like expanded your understanding in a meaningful way? Or was it really not effective towards those ends?
And how much of it was it professor quality could have been the difference in that case?
Yeah, I think professor quality definitely makes a difference. I mean, I understand the importance of taking those classes, but I think, I don't know, I guess for the amount of money that I was spending, it didn't really feel like it was something I needed. I know long term overall, it is helping me grow and become a more well-rounded human being and to be someone in the world, but when I think of college, I guess growing up, I always thought of, okay, it's going to be what I want to take, not they're telling me that I have to take this class. For example, SUNY Cortland told me that I could take any language that I wanted to before I transferred in. American Sign Language was something that had interested me. I took it for a year at OCC, and then I got to SUNY Cortland, and they said, nope, you have to take Spanish. So I had to start all over again, right? With that sort of thing, and it didn't really make sense to me that I'm now paying more and having to take summer classes when I could have gotten along just fine with American Sign Language.
I think that particular aspect may have changed in recent years, where it's
so.
now accepted. I've even gone so far.
They become more flexible with like working with classes you've already taken. They have changed it to some degree, yeah.
I've even gone so far as to argue that computer programming should be counted as a language because it is actually a language unto itself, and you're learning to communicate with computers, which is maybe one of the most relevant languages that we have in our modern world, but that was flatly rejected.
And so I want to go back to when you talked about, originally thought about speech pathology because you make more money. To what extent was your college experience generally about a love of learning versus I got to be here to get the degree, to get the good job? And then talk both for yourself and then comment on your peers if you think your peers are more likely to share your view or not share your view.
I think I felt a lot of, I mean, education's always been something in my household that was a non-negotiable, right, going to school. But I do love learning, right? I think both of those are equal for me. But the push for money, I think, really just came from me going to school. I mean, my dad went to school, but he only went for 2 years, right? I'm the first person in my family to get a master's degree and go that distance. And I know they're coming from a place of me wanting to do well, right, financially, but it just wasn't something that was fulfilling. Teaching I went into because I feel fulfilled in my job every day in some way, shape, or form. And I do still love what I do. The day I don't love what I do is when I'll stop teaching or learning.
Would it be accurate to say that the reason you got the master's degree was to fulfill the requirement for the New York State requirement for teacher certification?
Yeah.
Okay, so that wouldn't have been something that you would have pursued necessarily on your own outside of that.
Yeah, I mean, I can't picture myself doing anything other than teaching, so I would do whatever it takes.
So I love learning. If I could go to school for the rest of my life, I truly would.
Some people say PhD programs forever. That's what I
right,
should.
and that would be amazing. But kind of like Adrian was saying, in my house, school is non-negotiable. My parents, I'm first generation college. My parents always wanted me to do better than they did, but my parents also have their own businesses. But living on Long Island, where it's super expensive and taxes and taxes and taxes and whatever, it's super hard to run your own business and kind of not have an education when you're going into the job field or any job field that you want to go into. So again, it was non-negotiable, but I only really learned that how much I love being educated and educating myself when I got to college and I started learning what I love.
And think about your college experience. Can you identify with regard to learning at least one time your perspective changed or your opinion or worldview changed? Like you came into college believing X, but at the result of what you've learned interacting with others in college, you have, if not necessarily a completely different view, a notably changed view.
I learned to be authentically myself and non-apologetically myself. I think that, especially being a woman, I kind of learned that, or in the past, I was taught that I should appease everyone and that if a group of guys are with me and they're all Trump supporters, I have to act like I'm a Trump supporter because that's just what everyone else is saying, and, I have to accommodate my thoughts to theirs. Otherwise, I'm not cool, or they're gonna hate me, or they're gonna think I'm a feminazi, or whatever the case may be. But I think in college, it definitely, A, solidified my beliefs, and B, kind of gave me that boost of confidence that, okay, there are other people that think like me. My beliefs are valid regardless of who I'm around. And I think that that's super important for anybody to have that kind of skill, to know that you don't have to change yourself or your beliefs just based on what everyone else is saying.
Yeah, I don't think it was like a huge perspective shift. It was just finding like-minded people, like being in that space where I can connect with you about something, or I can connect with other people that think the same things. It wasn't like a life-altering sort of moment for me.
So, Jacqueline, a moment ago you mentioned an interesting kind of dynamic between yourself and some men you interacted with on campus. We know that every year fewer and fewer men are attending college. Do you have any thoughts about why this is? I mean, in your experience, have you seen some dynamics with the young men on campus that makes you come to some understanding as to why they might not be either attending college in the numbers that young women are, or not succeeding at the same rate that young women are?
And does it concern you if less men are going to college over time, or at least if the ratio goes down?
Yeah, I think it's extremely concerning, especially because men hold most of the power. I prefer for them to be educated. But I don't know how accurate this is, but based on what I've seen, I think I've seen a lot of toxic masculinity specifically growing within my generation, Gen Z, and Gen Alpha even, being...
Could you elaborate on that? When you say toxic masculinity, what specific actions or attitudes or perspectives are you seeing that represent that?
So I don't know if you guys have ever heard of Andrew Tate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that kind of alpha male, like, I need to work and women are below me, and
Super dominant alpha male philosophy
yes,
thing.
Yes.
Do you think that's really prevalent amongst the
Yes.
Even men in college too, as well. Like you noticed this. So guys in your classes, you felt this was perspectives. What they told you directly. You heard them talking amongst themselves, or like how did you find out that they have these views?
I can sense it definitely when we talk about certain things in class, especially English can get very political, and it's super interdisciplinary. So I think that when they start talking, I'm like, oh, okay, this is how you feel. That's weird, but I think that they're very like alpha male dominant based, and I think that that's why a lot of younger men are turning away from college, is because they think that they have to work a blue collar job and they have to get all muscular, and like I do think on the opposite end, more women are going to school because I think of it as a privilege. I think that my female ancestors fought for so long to go to school that I feel so lucky, and like I want to prove myself to them that they fought for a reason and do well for myself, but them. Like there are so many women, and there still are so many women who can't go to school and don't have the same opportunities that I do. So I do just want to do my best, and I think other women share that idea.
That's very interesting that you entered college with this great sense of responsibility, and kind of this legacy of the past that you were carrying forward. That's a very mature view for someone so young. I assume you entered college when you were 18 or so, right?
I entered college when I was 17, yeah.
Okay.
I have a late birthday, but I am 21 years old, about to graduate with my master's. So I've always been told that I'm a little mature for my age. But yeah, I've always kind of felt that sense of, not responsibility, but like, if I'm not doing that, then what am I doing? I have this opportunity and this privilege that so many others didn't have. I'm a big empathy gal over here, and I always feel like I need to help, or I should be helping, or I'm not doing enough to help. And like I said, I have this opportunity and this privilege, and I should be taking advantage of it because so many can't.
So turning back to the original question about young men in college these days, in your courses, did you see or get the sense that young men were struggling more than your female peers in your classes?
So English is weird. English is not a very male-dominated study at all. So the very few men that there are, I also think that they kind of have that ideology that they need to prove themselves, and that, you know, that kind of, again, toxic masculinity, alpha male dominance, because they're the minority now. And now they have to be like, well, I'm still manly even though I'm an English major, and overcompensate a lot. And it doesn't work well in their favor at all, because English tends to be quite a leftist, for the most part, a leftist study. So when they come in with more conservative views, they're kind of not shunned, but definitely not idealized, I think.
Do you feel we professors are generally oblivious to this? Because I'm thinking I teach classes, even if they're majority female, I don't ever recall men saying these comments in class, but you both are nodding that you're hearing these comments a lot. So do you sense they know well enough that professors, to shield those comments from professors, but they happily share them, for example, in small group discussions in class?
No, I think some of them have the social awareness to maybe not share that with the professor. I used to see a lot of it online more so. You know, people feel braver behind a screen. But I do agree I think there were maybe 2 men in my cohort, and they would have really conservative views and then immediately be not shut down, but, you know, there's 12 or 13 other women in the room that are all kind of agreeing with each other, and then they would get angry that they weren't being listened to, or that we were all on one side and they were quote unquote on the other, right? And then it's hard to have a conversation when they get angry because they can't see or hear any other opinion or thought, and then it feels like you're talking to a wall.
I actually have, in the past, had someone in one of my classes, a man, who in front of the professor says, like, oh yeah, like, I believe A, B, C, and D, and then behind closed doors is like, I believe XYZ.
So perform the idea of, like, I believe
Yes.
in gender equality, for example, but
Yes.
in reality.
Yes. And I don't know how often that occurs, but that did happen.
And you got the sense that this student was doing this to try to appease the professor out of kind of an interest in passing the class? Because was this like a strategy of some kind, or was this kind of a sense of, I don't know, lack of confidence in sharing their true self in the class?
I wish that he would have shared his true self in the class, because I think that that's the best way to learn. Whether he would educate me, or I would educate him, or the professor would educate him, like, I think that having discussions is the best way to learn.
Yeah, it's actually been my experience is that I've noticed, I've been now teaching 8 years at the higher ed level, and that the kind of comments students can make, like a maybe not extremely prejudiced, but, you know, somewhat biased or whatever, or somewhat ignorant comment, they would share that comment class, which actually opened the door to challenge it. And even better, when it opened the door for peers to challenge it, right, rather than the professor. I see so little of that now, and it was so easy to lull myself in, oh, you know, I guess, for example, on the topic of race, after George Floyd's, like, you know, the next generation, they get it now. But what you're saying, or I've also become to understand, is that I think there's just a lot more self-censorship, right? A fear of that, I'm not going to say the thing that's going to impact my grade, or that's going to have my peers judge me or say bad things about me, so I'm just going to say nothing. But then the what's scary about that is the very likely to go to online spaces to share those views uncritically, and thus further polarize these kind of spirals towards that.
Yeah, and I see a lot of more right-leaning people tend to say, oh, well, if I share how I really feel, then my professor's going to fail me. I am left-leaning, but I've never felt that a professor that I've ever had would have ever done that. Like, I do think that our professors are generally fair, and it probably does happen to certain people and in certain situations where if a teacher or professor doesn't believe the same thing that the kid does, then they give them a lower grade. But I very rarely see that happening and can very hardly imagine that actually happening. But that's their fear.
In order to fail a class or fail an assignment due to a difference in political opinion, I think you'd have to do something really egregious, just like basically not do the assignment, right?
Right.
Like in one of my physics classes, if we're studying orbits and I had a flat earther in there and they just didn't do the calculation because they didn't believe in it, that would be a reason for failing the assignment, not because they held the belief, a different belief.
Where I have noticed it with some is not that you're more likely to fail or get a lower grade for having a different view, but the standard might be higher. If a student agrees, if some professors perceive the student agrees with them, their standard for criticizing their assignments might be lower, as opposed to if they have an opposite view, there's suddenly a higher bar for evidence to defend that view. And I think it's great to have a higher bar of evidence broadly, but that should be equally applied. And the one who agreed with you shouldn't get a pass, even if you understand the reasons, there should be the same challenge to force a student to kind of articulate why they hold those views.
Right.
So we put you on the spot here asking you to dissect the psychology of young men.
I did my best.
It was great. I appreciate that. I think it would be interesting to also hear your views on the issues facing young women on campus. And there's a lot of mental health challenges that young women are facing now, especially with things like social media. And we hear about all of the issues that come about with people being able to apply filters that modify how you look, right? And this can very easily get out of control and cause skewed perceptions about what it is to be attractive or likable or whatever. So if you wouldn't mind, I'd love to hear just your thoughts on challenges facing young women today.
Yeah, I can't necessarily speak much to the college aspect, but I teach middle school girls. And constantly, I mean, if it's not the filters or telling them to change something about themselves or take this supplement or exercise this way, right? Like there's this constant pressure on them to be a certain way or to look a certain way. There's on TikTok, there's a whole hashtag or whatever of skinny talk, and it's basically encouraging eating disorders. Like, what did you do to lose 10 pounds in a week? Oh, I didn't eat, or I only ate crackers or rice cakes, right? And like, you can tell, there have been students that I've had previously where you can tell that they're kind of falling prey to that stuff, because how could they not? They have access to it 24/7. So there's that aspect, but I think the biggest thing that I've noticed is really just the language that they're using with each other. Again, they feel so brave to say nasty, vile things to one another behind a screen that they would never say in person. So there's that standard to fit like a certain beauty mark, but then there's also just this constant need to tear each other down. I don't see a lot of uplifting, and I know middle school, right, is its own thing, but there's never any celebrations of another woman's like success or milestones or achievements or young girls. It's always just, I wish I had that, or I'm jealous that you did this, or I'm upset for XYZ, so I'm going to make sure that everyone else is upset and can't win too.
And when this happens, I ask this because I'm totally ignorant of these spaces. Like, I really don't tread there at all. When these types of exchanges happen, do these young women tend to do it anonymously, or are they actually just calling each other out and they know what's...
They call each other out, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. And do you think what you're seeing in your students in your class is significantly different than what you all experienced as students in college?
Yeah, I mean, when I was in middle school, Facebook was the only form of social media that we had. Snapchat came out when I was a freshman in high school. Instagram along the way. I think TikTok has been the big one, just because there's no real repercussions for the things that they post, whether it's from school or it's from home. Like, they just continue to be able to have these platforms to just be mean to each other. And sometimes they think they're funny or they think that they're joking. But it almost like it comes from more of a, I'm going to hurt you before you can hurt me sort of thing. The boys that I have are never that aggressive with one another, verbally anyways. I mean, physically sometimes, but the girls can just, it's a whole different level. I don't think I would survive if I was in middle school right now with the way that they are.
There's a number of people who are advocating for policy changes, such as banning cell phones in schools. There's a big discussion in some states about banning TikTok outright. What are your thoughts on these types of prohibitions?
I mean, I know that New York State just passed, to ban cell phones for next school year. I think it's going to be a challenge. I don't feel well equipped to handle that challenge. I mean, most of these kids have had screens from a very, very young age, and it's been with them constantly. Even when you tell a kid to put a phone away, right, they won't give it up.
Especially with the COVID, right? Especially post-COVID.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't take a kid's phone if they're not, I can't rip it out of their hands, and I think there's different methods to go about it, but I also know that a lot of that's also coming from the parents too that don't want their students to have to give up those privileges when they're phone privileges when they're at school. So,
and it's one thing to control it in a school environment where you can have a policy that says no, and then it's another thing, to think about what happens at home, and so students might not have their phone for 8 hours and then go and have it for the next 16. Cool.
See, I guess it just depends though, because I feel like I've created a good rapport and relationship with my students where there's a phone occasionally and you have to tell them to put it away, but in class it's really not an issue. But that's just for me personally. Like, I can't speak to other classrooms or what goes on, but it's not something that I'm thinking about with them. I'm worried about other things that they're bringing into the school that they shouldn't be, right? Like, cell phones is usually not at the top of my priority list, but that's just my perspective.
I do also just want to point out the fact that Adrienne is probably one of the best teachers I've ever seen. I mean, she has like over 20 kids sitting in her class for lunch, for their lunch period, because they just want to hang out with her and talk to her. So that might just be, that might just be, I'm not in the classroom yet, but I fear that might just be your good.
Well, way to model
that.
not tearing it down.
Women supporting women.
Before we move on,
Sure.
Jacqueline, I don't know if you wanted to contribute anything to the discussion about women in college and psychological issues or challenges.
About like the whole filter thing and
Well,
the way they
or
feel about
more broadly,
themselves.
I mean, just any
Sexism, for example, you might have
Yeah.
experienced from the institution, from professors, from your peers.
the toxic masculinity amongst your peers. So, just kind of broadly speaking, did you see or experience any kind of psychological issues of note?
I'll just give one example. When I remember, and I'm embarrassed that it was into my PhD program that I noticed that. I was at some lecture talk, right? It was like a discussion, and a female friend of mine said, like, notice the difference between how the females and the males are gonna ask a question. And the females ask these questions like so deferentially and like, I understand what you're trying to say, but I'm trying to understand it. And a lot of the males ask extremely aggressively, like, I don't understand how you could use this methodology, blah, blah, blah. And I hadn't even noticed that. And that's a pattern I then noticed so often, that there's this gendered way to interact, even sometimes how you ask a question. So things like that. Have you felt like you were noticing dynamics where being a woman, you were expected to act in a different ways than your male peers or anything else?
I've actually been told multiple times that my vocabulary is too strong and too out there, and a lot of people can't understand what I'm saying, so I need to dial it back. And I don't know how sexist that may be, or if that's just me as an English major, but I also see, and it tends to be men, in my class who use a different verbiage because they want to sound smart, but their words actually have no substance. So they're saying a lot of big words that like ultimately mean nothing.
Yeah.
And I know why they do it, and I get it. And like I don't think that it's specific. I don't know why it's specifically male oriented, but it does tend to be. Like I said, I do think that in class they are trying to make up for something and compensate for not being the majority. But that's just been my experience. But yeah, I have been told multiple times that my vocabulary is too strong and that I need to dial it back. And I've been in conversation with men before when they're talking about politics and the economy, and I jump in and they look at me like I have 9 heads because they're like, oh, I didn't know that you knew about that. And I'm like, no, yeah, I'm not just pretty. Thank you, though. Appreciate that. I do have a brain. But then, like, the other girls that I were with, they had said, like, oh, I knew nothing about that, which is okay. Like, that might just not be their forte, but I do think certain girls also hold themselves back to an extent to keep the men in the conversation.
I was told that none of my students would ever take me seriously because I'm a young, attractive woman. That they would never listen to anything that I said and not respect me.
I've been told this by boys my age, and they want me to take it as a compliment, and I really don't.
That no one will take you seriously?
Yes.
I think they focus on the, well, I called you pretty part.
Yeah, many men have said this to me, men my age, professors have said this to me, saying, like, oh, you're gonna be in trouble because, you know, the boys aren't gonna listen to you because you're too pretty. Yeah.
That's a very awkward attempt at a compliment. If that's what that is.
Yeah, and these are my higher-ups, so I didn't particularly, you know, it's one thing if it's, you know, 21-year-old boys, but it's come from a higher-up. It doesn't feel great.
To me, it lets me know how they actually think of me, which is they don't think very highly of me at all. It doesn't make me feel respected. It's demeaning, and I cried after I went
it sounds
home.
terribly disempowering.
I can't help the way that I look, and I don't know. I when I think of my relationships with students or anyone else, right? I'm not picking people because of the way that they look physically. I'm picking you because of what you bring to the table, right? Or I'm respecting you because of the way that you engage with me or you treat me like an equal. It's not because of your physical appearance. So to just be put into that box is so frustrating because I'm not changing his mind, right?
Yeah.
Also, like, did they not respect their female teachers that they found attractive? Like, are you calling yourself out right now for being crappy? Because that's kind of what it sounds like, and you're kind of normalizing that, like, weird student-teacher relationship line that shouldn't be crossed as well, and making it sound acceptable when it's absolutely not. And they're making it sound so normalized when it's completely inappropriate and should not even be a topic of discussion.
Well, I hope that was a minority experience and not a dominant experience with your teachers. It was more common than
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
That's very unfortunate.
All
I'm
right,
sorry to hear
that's,
that.
that's good for us to know. Talking about teaching and professors, why don't you tell us what would you generally think about your professors in the undergraduate level? With default reverence or respect that had to be earned? And then a follow-up would be what makes a good professor? Traits, actions, activities, etc.
Default. I think that was just the way that I was brought up. But then I was thinking about this question earlier, and there were plenty of professors that I've had, not necessarily in undergrad either, but in my master's program as well, that there was, I mean, I was not even treated as a person, right? It was always feeling less than, it was always feeling uncomfortable, and that shouldn't be the dynamic in my brain, right? Like, I know...
Can you expand on that when you say you felt uncomfortable? Like, was that something directed at you as an individual, or was that because you were, I don't know, for example, in a large enrollment class and you couldn't ever establish a relationship with a professor?
I mean, I think it depends on the professor, but when I think of particularly a poor experience I had in my master's program, it was as the whole group, but then also singled out. I think I talked to other peers too that didn't have great relationships with this professor. And I still, right, was told, like, you have to be respectful, you have to, you know, just, yep, thank you, no thank you, whatever, right? Play the part, I guess, of the student. But it gets to a point where you're treating me as if I'm not capable, right? Like, I am in a master's program, I do know what I'm doing. You're treating me as if I shouldn't be here, or if I'm asking a question, I'm made to feel like it was wrong, or I'm made to feel like I shouldn't be asking a question, or there was just no, like, guidance or help or warmth, right? I think that's a quality that I look for as someone that's compassionate and understanding and empathetic, and is also, like, humility too, right? And I didn't feel that way. It was just, I'm the professor, I'm in charge, I know better, you have to listen to me, and that's it. There's no room for anything else. So
it was a very one-way directed education.
Yes.
Yeah. And I imagine the way you teach is probably the opposite
Way
of that.
different, yeah.
Much more interactive, I'm
Yeah.
guessing.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. Sometimes you learn more from the bad models than the good models, right? Sometimes you need the bad
1,000%.
models too. Jacqueline, what about yourself? What makes a good professor?
So I am extremely academically driven, and I've been very grateful to have such amazing professors, specifically in the English department. However, and I because I'm so academically driven, I was so used to saying, like, yes, respect is just off the bat, this is what I have to do. But eventually I learned, after being disrespected so many times, that it's earned at the end of the day, and professors are people, and yes, they make mistakes, but also they're human, and they're not perfect and they don't always know everything, and they're not.
Oh,
they
and
are
I come to school tired
Yes.
and sometimes unprepared,
and
you
cranky.
know, life gets in our
and
way as
yes,
teachers too,
of
right?
course.
Yeah.
And like I can completely understand that, but sometimes they also do just suck as human beings. Like sometimes they're not great people in general, and I shouldn't expect them to be. And I also don't feel as though I have to give them that level of respect just because they have a higher level of education than me. Although I do respect that they do have that, I don't think that I need to kiss their feet because of that.
I'm glad you brought this up and mentioned this here. I have a little theory that I want to question you about here. My theory is that there is, while we look for great teachers and we review each other with the course teacher evaluations, you all did this as students, right, where you rate your teachers at the end of the semesters. And we use those to try to evaluate teachers and try to encourage good teaching practices. My theory is that there's actually great value in having people who are not great professors in the kind of the sense that we're meaning here. Because when we encounter them as students, it forces us to dig in and succeed in the face of obstacles, right? To find that sense of perseverance and to build grit. And I don't know if that, just maybe think about that. Does that resonate at all with your experience where you had professors in your courses that you didn't develop such a strong relationship with? Did you find that despite that there was still value in them, or that there was a different value in somebody who was a lesser teacher in that sense?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I have definitely not been certain professors' biggest fans, but I had learned that they don't deserve that level of respect that they kind of expect from me and think of as like a transactional as opposed to a genuine relationship with their students. But I would never tell them this, but they did teach me that I don't have to just outright respect everyone that's in a place of authority when they are disrespecting me. Again, I'd never tell them that they did anything for me ever, but...
And what are some... Oh, you say some... Go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, I think that it definitely teaches you something, but when I look back, I guess for me, all I can see is the frustration that I had at that point in time. And if I'm not being treated with respect, it's hard for me to even take what you're saying seriously.
Right, to be open
Like,
to learning. And...
Yeah, I kind of shut down after a certain point, because why am I going to be open to that if you're not giving me that same sort of, even a tiny little piece of it? If you're not giving it back, why am I going to be engaged with what you're saying?
So you had mentioned warmth, humility, and I think something else. Other characteristics of that makes a effective professor?
I think humility is definitely a very important trait.
I like a professor that takes the time to actually get to know you outside of, right, the classroom setting. Asking questions, small details, right, which is something that I've taken from being a student and then brought into my own classroom experience now. I think someone that is understanding and flexible. Like, there were a lot of personal issues that I had going on in college, and there were some professors I felt like I could talk to and explain, like, hey, maybe I need an extension for something, right? Or I'm letting you know I might miss class for XYZ reason. And there were some that it didn't matter what was going on, you were showing up to class. And there were others that took the time to, hey, are you okay? Hey, push it back, don't worry about it, life happens, sort of thing. So I think a professor that can like roll with the punches like that and who genuinely cares, because you can tell who really, really cares and who does not at all. It's very evident.
I had a professor in undergrad who, when I was explaining why I had missed class, she was like, I don't know why you're telling me this. Like, it's not necessary. I don't need to know your life story. Just tell me something is wrong and I understand. And like, I can do as much as I can to help you, but you do not need to come to class. Like, this class is not your first priority. Your first priority is yourself. And I think professors that can admit that and understand students have work, students have lives outside of this, students have other priorities, students have families. Like, students are people, and professors who get that tend to be the ones that students connect with the most and have the better CTEs.
Just pivot to another quick question. AI. Can you tell us a little bit about how, if you use that at all as a student, if you or as a teacher you notice it, and in general, what are your thoughts on the impact that AI is having on education, are you more positive or negative about it?
And generally, how widespread is the use of AI in particular amongst your peers?
I'm terrified of AI, really. It's so unimaginable to me. Like, this is the world that we're living in today. Any sort of AI, chat GPT, all that stuff is blocked in the district that I work in. In college, it wasn't really, we had like Quizlet, right? That was the only.
So you came through just before
Yeah.
ChatGPT
and
really
I'm
emerged.
grateful, really,
Yeah.
I am. But I'd be lying if I said I didn't use it sometimes to make my life a little bit easier.
Like for lesson plans or?
Not necessarily, but for like crafting an email, right? Something along those lines. Or maybe asking it a question. Like, I use it at home a lot, even though I know it's not good for the environment. Sorry. I just think of your class when I said that. But
Good.
Yeah.
God, you'd be guilty for the rest of your life.
It wasn't, I don't know. I'm lucky that I missed that, but our schools have cracked down on blocking those things. But we also don't have any policies in place. I had a student this year write an entire essay that was from AI. And when I, called them out and called them in for it, no, I wrote that all myself. And I said, can you tell me what this word means? Not a clue what it was. Well, it was in your essay, so I know that you didn't do it now. And it depends on how you use it, right? Like, if I'm using it to craft an email so that I can grade something else, right? I'm not using it to replace what I have. I'm not using it to take away from my own, like, what I bring to the table, I guess. is
You're
what
not
I'm trying to say.
compensating for a lack of skill.
Thank you. Yes.
Right.
Thank
Like
you.
your creativity,
Yes.
your originality, right?
Yes. Yeah. I think it's helpful, but I think that it's often a cop out. It's an excuse. It's a way to I don't want to do that, so I'm gonna put it through ChatGPT and be good, or Gemini or whatever other bot that they're using.
So Jacqueline, you're still in school, have been in more recently. What have you seen?
Yeah, so it mostly started when I was a freshman in college, and like I said, I'd be lying if I said I didn't use it, but it was for biology, which I ultimately failed, so what use was it really to me? But my peers use it 24/7 all of the time. I truly believe it's the biggest brain rot of this, like, millennia.
Worse than TikTok?
Worse than TikTok,
Hands
because
down.
I have peers who use it for every single essay that they have to write, even if it's like a one-page paper that they have to write. Without it, they can't, because they've been using it for so long now, they actually can't do it themselves anymore. Like, they've lost the ability
Right. That's
to
definitely my
write
concern.
simple things and do simple things. One of my friends had texted me and said, hey, can you look over this cover letter for me? I said, sure. I looked at it and I said, this is completely AI. Just by looking at it for 2 seconds. And she was like, yeah, I know, but like, I just want to make sure it looks good. And I'm like, no, this is not okay. Like, you need to write one on your own. And she's like, I tried. I sat here for 30 minutes and I can't. And I'm like, this is really, and you don't see anything wrong with that. Like, this is horrifying that our doctors and our lawyers and our future teachers and the people that are going to be running our country can't write the 5-paragraph essay.
What you say, though, makes me think that maybe there's a silver lining here, in the sense that there is going to be a subset of people, maybe a small subset of people, who will not do that, like yourself, and you will continue to develop these skills. And your originality and your unique way of writing will immediately shine and be totally obvious to anyone reading your cover letter, for example. You will thereby distinguish yourself immediately. And maybe that will allow people who are not using AI to actually excel and stand out in
I like
ways
the
they hadn't
positivity.
before.
Yeah.
I don't know. It is a small
admire
hope.
it.
Yeah.
I admire it.
I
but-
can only hope so. But I do also think that the 60-year-old white guy who's hiring me probably doesn't recognize ChatGPT the way that I might. So I think
So there's going to be a generational issue there.
that 1,000%.
Yeah. And to what extent? So you mentioned that your peers use this and use it extensively. To what fraction of your peers would you say are in that group that you
90%.
90%?
90% of
Are
them
using it extensively.
are using it for almost every single assignment.
Wow.
It's-
And
yeah.
I think there's,
Wow.
as professors, we would have the hope that, we know some people are going to throw their essay prompt into ChatGPT or Claude or whatever, and then get the result. Some people are going to use it for more productive means like brainstorming, and some people are going to use it to help editing. So you're shaking your head. So you think that's a minority?
Yeah.
So most people are just throwing the assignment straight into ChatGPT and copying whatever comes out.
There are even websites now that humanize it for you.
Oh, one thing I heard about is people, maybe you've heard about this. You run the prompt through ChatGPT. You take it to Google translate it to, I don't know, Romanian or something, Czech. Translate it back to English. Translate it to German or whatever, another language, and then bring it back. And now it's riddled with some errors, and it looks more natural.
Yes, it's insane. It is insanity. It's
So I guess people have automated that process now.
yes,
Effectively.
it's completely dystopian, but.
Well, speaking of dystopia, so Trump wants to part of the one.
That's a nice segue.
He's completely gutted the Department of Education, but one of the things he wants to have it still do is incorporate more AI in our classroom settings. I think there's a lot of different reasons for that, right? What a great way to completely marginalize teachers by having them being replaced by AI bots, etc. But can you talk a little bit? So this is a really scary time. The AI is terrifying outside of the context of what's happening politically, but we're in a particularly scary time in the United States as well. So I was wondering if you could just talk about personally or professionally what it's like now to live in Trump 2.0 and all that means.
So, one of the things I think personally, especially if we bring it back to that toxic masculinity, I remember when he first won in 2016, people sobbing in the dorm room that I was in. And I don't think then, because I was also 17 when I went to school, that I understood the gravity of the situation. I wasn't as well versed in it as I am now. I sobbed this time around when he won. As a woman, I am terrified every single day. I feel lucky that we do live in New York State, but that doesn't necessarily quell everything else. I feel like it gives a platform to those men that I guess I didn't realize were Trump supporters or held some of those similar beliefs or ideologies. And it's disheartening and it's disappointing and it's maddening, to be quite honest, to see the amount of people that just buy into whatever he says and there's no critical thinking skills that go along with it. I've lost friendships. I can't be around certain family members anymore, to be quite honest with you. Or if we are, we can't talk about politics. It impacts my job. I mean, he just cut $1 billion for mental health services. That's a huge part of the district that I'm in. Kids are struggling. People need people, right, to help them through those things, and we don't have access to that. I've had to stop watching the news as much, like small doses, because it just breaks my heart what's going on, and then I can't focus on anything else, right? It's all I can think about. I've definitely noticed since January, just for me anyways, like a shift. I don't feel like myself. I feel constantly anxious. I'm already anxious, but I feel like it's exacerbated at this point, and I don't know where to put it or where to channel it because this is our reality. Like I can't find a way to make sense of it or self-soothe or find joy in the small moments. I'm trying, but the crushing reality that's just always around is exhausting to me. It's exhausting, and I don't know how to make it better. I don't know what I can do, right? I want to help people. Same thing Jacqueline was saying earlier, right? Like, I want to help my students. I don't want to have to censor myself in a classroom with a student who is trans. I want to be able to call them their preferred name or use their preferred pronouns. I don't want to have to take down an everyone's welcome here sign, which I have in my classroom, right? I don't want to be worried about those things. I don't want to have my student loan payments increase, right? I can't afford to live if that happens. It impacts every single aspect of my life and my loved ones. And I think that that's oftentimes what I've noticed with Trump supporters is that lack of empathy. They're not thinking of other people, right? Like, I want first and foremost, like, everyone else around me to be good, and then it can come back to me. And they don't echo that same sentiment. And I think that's part of the problem too.
I majorly agree. I do think that a lot of Trump supporters do lack empathy. Trump supporters often ask me, why do you care so much about abortion when you live in New York State? Because that could have been me. woman in Texas who doesn't have access to abortion and dies of sepsis, that could have been me, but by luck and by chance, it's not. And that, I mean, womanhood, I think, is like a sisterhood where even if I see a random woman down the block who I have no idea who she is, but she's running from a man, the first thing I'm going to do is go up and try to help her because that's just kind of what we do. So I do kind of feel like, again, a sense of responsibility and that empathy that A, that could have been me, B, it shouldn't be happening, and there's no reason that it should be happening. But I do think that regarding how life is under the Trump 2.0 administration, it's horrifying. Specifically what RFK said about autism, it's again completely a dystopia. My classes are extremely depressing when we talk about the future of our classrooms because we don't know what to expect. We don't know if we're gonna be able to have classrooms, and we don't know anything.
Do you also find the professors struggle, like a year ago, oh, I'll teach you about this because this is what the law is, but we don't even know what the law is, so this might not apply to you. So you find, are they struggling even to teach a lot of their content? Yeah,
they are struggling with it as well. I mean, obviously they have their syllabi and their curriculum that they want to teach, but not all of it is still applying. So they teach it, and then us as the students raise our hands and say, well, what about this law that just passed? And they're like, yeah. And we're like, oh, okay, that's really promising. Thank you. They don't have the answers, and that's horrifying that, the people that we look to for the answers don't have them. They have no idea what to tell us.
I feel like that sense of uncertainty characterizes our time maybe more than anything else. Like, I have no sense of what the future is going to look like 5 years from now, 10 years from now. It could go off the deep end and things could totally collapse. Maybe we will end up in a better place than today. I have no idea. Do either of you have a gut feeling at this point about where things are headed?
Down.
10 years from now? It feels pretty bad.
It feels pretty bleak
Down.
to me at this point. Every single day I wake up and I think, can't get worse than yesterday, or he can't say something worse than he did the day before, and then he does. Or the RFK thing too. I can't fathom how someone can spew that into the world, but then I can't fathom how people buy into, and not even just him, but some of the statements that have been made. It just doesn't feel like it's getting any better. There's no light right now at the end of the tunnel for me, none.
And, a lot of people that I know that are Trump supporters say, oh, we'll just wait until the next election. Just wait until the next election. This is affecting people now. I mean, that man who was a United States citizen just got sent to El Salvador and cannot be sent back for a very specific reason. This is affecting people now. That man will not be here in 4 years when we get to reelect someone new. These are permanent decisions. I mean, it took extremely long to get Roe v. Wade into place, and it's going to take double the time to get it back into place.
Right, so much easier to break things than to build things.
Yeah, and currently we're at a breaking point. We're breaking things 24/7, breaking them down. And in 4 years, if we get someone who's amazing, great, but that person is going to have such a huge responsibility to build things back. And then the cycle's going to continue, and someone else is going to get elected, and they're going to start breaking it down and building it up. When I heard that other countries around the world were protesting for us, I think that was the moment that I was like, oh. Like, A, we're not seeing that. It's completely censored. The only way I actually have seen that is on TikTok, funny enough. It's insane that other countries are protesting for the United States. Like, that is unreal to me, and I think the moment I saw that was when I kind of was like, okay, there's no light at the end of the tunnel.
And I'm curious, do your professors, and if you had professors now, if they shared your views of the bleakness of and there being no light in the tunnel, would you want them to share that directly so that you can kind of know that they're also being vulnerable and sharing that, and that you're not crazy for thinking that? Or do you feel they have some role to find that light somewhere to keep things going?
Jeremy, this is so funny of you asking this of us because you scared me so horribly
the first day of class
when I had you telling me, this was what, 2022, 23, telling me that the world was going to end and that
I don't know if I
everything was
used
going
those
to
exact
burn.
words.
You said it was going to burn.
Yes. And
Well, there was major forest fires happening here in New York from California at the time, to be fair. I was describing reality.
But yeah, so again, and I loved you. Like, you have still been one of my favorite professors I've ever had because you keep it real with us, and we do appreciate that. As bleak as it is and as upsetting as it is, we appreciate the realness, I think. But you also said, well, if everyone just kind of did these things, like preserving indigenous land and planting and taking care of the ecosystem, like, that does kind of give a level of hope. Like, I didn't leave your class feeling depressed. But I understood the reality of the situation. I understood that there was a problem and that problem had to be fixed.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever had, with most of my professors, conversations outright about politics or their political views. I think you could, just based on conversations, you can kind of gauge, right? Like, I don't tell my students who I voted for, but they could guess. So I think it does help, in a sense, to keep it real, but also being able to focus on something, like a small thing that I could do, gives me hope, and it also makes me stop ruminating in the current reality, because I think we spend way too much time doing that, or at least I do anyways. And really, I'm not a person that just sits and complains or doesn't want to take action. Like, I have to be doing something. There has to be some way that we can get through this, or like I can, I don't know, some sort of change. Like, I have to believe that, or else what else am I doing and why am I here?
I agree. And if I don't know about a solution, or no one says anything, they just say the world is ending and everything's on fire and it sucks, I will spiral. And it won't be good for anybody. And I think a lot of us will, because that's just depressing and sad, and what do I have to live for if there's nothing good coming at the end? But I do need to understand that reality in order to fix things. I can't fix something if I don't realize there's a problem. So I think while saying this is a problem, you also, or professors kind of need to say, but there is a solution, and this is how you do it.
It has to be a balance.
Yeah.
Yeah. If there wasn't, I mean, if we walked into your class and you said everything sucks, why would I keep going to class,
Yeah.
right? Like, what's the point? If you have to make people believe that there is still good, and there is, but again, to fight for something, because if everything just sucks and the world's burning, then what's the point in any of it? What's the point in education? What are we doing?
I think that's one of the senses of the idea of resilience, is to be able to carry on and, despite everything that's bringing you down, find joy and find a sense of hope. In that spirit, maybe each of you could share something for, maybe think of it as a piece of advice for the next generation, or for everyone listening, and for me and Jeremy. What's a little bit of hope, or what brings you joy in these times?
Kids learning. I know I'm a teacher, so it's different, but when I was observing in Adrian's class and I was helping an 8th grader learn how to read, of course it was sad, and because a lot of students in this district don't know how to read at the 8th grade level. But I sat there and helped him, and I taught him how to sound out words because he didn't know. And when he was slowly getting it, that made me feel good. And maybe that's like a white knight syndrome kind of thing, but
I think that's at the heart of education. My feeling is that education is all about helping people that need something. And we all need something, whether it's learning how to read or a desire to understand the origins of the universe or something. We're always trying to fulfill some sort of need there. And I think that's exactly the spirit of what a good teacher brings to the table.
Yeah, so that's what makes me happy, is
Laughing with them. Like, in the middle of a lesson and a kid says something goofy, or I don't know, I'll have kids that just stand up and like will dance sometimes, right? Like, the fact that they're still being kids and just giggling with them is so much fun to me. Like, I derail the class a lot because of that, but like fostering those connections, and then seeing them, the first group of kids that I taught are now in 11th grade, and which makes me feel really old, but seeing them continue to grow and evolve and become great humans, like that brings me joy. But giggling with my group right now is the best part of my day every single day.
A few semesters ago, I asked students a question about astrology, and then some student said, "Oh, you can never date." I think it was Virgo. I'm pretty. Is that the one you're not supposed to date? Virgo.
Oh, that's me. I hope
Oh, okay.
not. It would explain a lot if it is, but no.
Oh, whatever. No. Sorry, it's Capricorn. Whatever it was, it was.
Scorpio.
Oh, Scorpio. That's it. That's
Yeah.
the Scorpio. Okay. But and the student says like, "Well, you can never date a Scorpio." And I was like, well, that's a kind of crazy thing to say. But then like the entire class agreed, and then there was a Scorpio in class, and the Scorpio was like, "Oh no, yeah, you should never date us." And so my question is just astrology. How widespread is astrology interest among yourselves, your peers, and how many people, including majors, actually take it seriously to any degree?
I love astrology. I have a Jupiter tattoo on my arm. I'm so serious. I love the planets. And you know what? Even if it's not true or it's not real, I love it. And it gives me something to do. And I'm going to read my horoscope every morning. And it's going to say, take care of yourself today. And I'm going to say, you know what? I will. Because it's just, and I have to admit, certain people do attain themselves to their
They fit the mold.
they fit the mold.
Yeah.
For sure. I gotta admit, Sagittarius men I will never go near again. They're horrible.
Yeah, Cancer men.
Yes like
Worse.
and listen, it's probably not based in fact. I know that, I can understand that, but Cancer men and Sagittarius men are not great.
No.
There's a reason.
It's something to bond over.
Yeah.
Because you either love it or you can't stand it. Either way, you have something to talk about. But
I
don't know.
also actually think, on a more serious note about it, that it's a way for men to kind of say that women are stupid.
Yep.
And our interests don't matter and whatever, blah blah
But
blah.
by making fun of beliefs in astrology specifically.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you think it's a pretty gendered belief,
Extremely,
pattern of belief.
extremely,
Yeah.
yeah. It's something for women to bond over, 1,000%. She just understood what I said when I said that Sagittarius men are the
Yeah.
worst, and when she said Cancer men are the worst, I said, yeah, absolutely. It's just a known, common understanding
Yeah.
between women. Not all women.
So
but
what are the good ones then?
I'm a
I've
Libra.
yet to find out.
I'm a Libra. I like Libras. I like Leos, Aquariuses.
I get along well with Pisces too.
Yeah, I like Geminis. Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't love Virgo.
I know. You either love us or you hate us. No, but a lot of men will, even on dating apps too, it will say, the prompt will be never have I ever, and wanted to hear about my horoscope.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many times I've
Really?
seen that. Oh yeah.
And that's a red flag for you if you see
Yeah,
that.
come on.
Because let us have
It's
fun.
goofy and silly.
Yeah, let us have fun. And granted, obviously there are going to be people who take it too far and take it too seriously, yada yada. But for the most part, it really is just all fun and a way to bond. And a lot of men get really upset about it, and I think because we're oh, Sagittarius men suck, so a Sagittarius man who's listening to this might be oh, well, screw you, horoscopes aren't real. So, and yeah, sure, valid, I guess, but come on, we're kidding for 90% of it. It's a good, 70-30.
And when you think of yourself as Gen Z, what do you see, if any, differences between Gen Z and previous generations? Is there any things you think one of the ways Gen Z stands out is X, Y, Z?
So I think Jeremy and I are of the Gen X generation. Just me at the very edge. You a few years in.
I'm technically a Zennial because I'm kind of on that board.
Yeah, we're kind of on that. So maybe if you compare yourselves against us, I don't know, and other professors or people of our generation, do you see kind of stark differences in behaviors?
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
Okay.
Yeah. But the respect thing that we were talking about earlier, right? I don't feel the need to just give it right away anymore. And I feel that's something, especially that my parents will struggle with understanding. I also think this idea of, I don't have kids, but gentle parenting, I always see videos of that, and I know that if I was gentle parented, I would have been a different human being, right? I think that I'm able to have conversations with Gen Z a lot easier. I think that they're more open to having a difference of opinions, but having a respectful conversation surrounding those things for the most part.
What about how could Gen Z improve? What could Gen Z do differently?
I actually wrote my college essay about this. I graduated high school in 2021, so it was at the height of all the protests, everything. And I had wrote specifically about how Gen Z is tired and sick and tired of everything that's going on. And I do think that we have to be the change, because if we're not, then who will be? Unfortunately, I think that Gen Alpha at this point is just brain rot, TikTok, ChatGPT, all that. I think later Gen Zs were probably the last generation that like played outside till the street lights went on, you know. And I think that millennials have been beaten down so much. My brother's millennial, and I think that they've been beaten down so much by the older generations that at this point they're just done. Like, they're just over it. They're very depressed. They're very like, this is my entry-level job when I have my master's degree and, you know, whatever. And I think Gen Z is like, no, I'm not going to do that because I'm not going to fit the mold. I don't want to be getting an entry-level position with my master's degree. Like, I refuse to do that. I am $100,000 in debt, and I'm not going to be getting paid $15 an hour with my master's degree. Like, I just refuse to do that.
Yeah, it's almost as interesting, like, what you see over time, and there's a whole lot of different reasons why it's happened, but basically every generation of the past generations has had it harder than the previous generation. Like, less opportunities, you know, you have to work harder for the same benefits for the same job, etc. And it seems like what might be happening is millennials maybe were the last generation to like still believe in the contract. Like, yeah, I don't have it as good as the previous one, but you know, I still see a path forward. And then things being so bleak now to kind of finally be like, many people to be like, I'm not going to opt into that system anymore. I no longer see that system as viable for me.
I see a lot of older generations saying, oh, Gen Z doesn't want to work, they don't want to do this, they're lazy, blah, blah, blah. It's not even that we're lazy, it's just that we refuse to put up with what you're giving us. And I think that that is a super important trait to have. Like, I don't want to sit here and get stomped on by you and say, oh, go get me my coffee to get paid, again, $15 an hour when I have my master's degree or I'm $100,000 in college debt. Like, that is just not something that I am going to put up with.
I think from the flip side, it could be perceived as, and I'm not speaking specifically about you, but I think there's a perception that Gen Zers lack a work ethic and falter too quickly when presented with challenges. So it's interesting to hear your perspective on it as well, as kind of like you just don't want to deal with the bullshit.
Yeah.
Which is, I can see that side as well. I have a little bit of a hard time understanding that, to be honest. And this is the generational difference. Mm-hmm. I think because I see it as like, well, yeah, that's just life. Like, life is full of bullshit that you put up with and you have to do. Like, that's all jobs at all times in history, right?
I think that we just think it doesn't have to be like that. Like, there are changes that can be made that it doesn't have to be like that, as opposed to just kind of like you said, like going with the system and just being another cog in the machine.
Well, I think it's important to try to reimagine the future and
Right.
find new ways of doing things. Absolutely. I am pretty skeptical and jaded at this point in my life, and I think the ways of reimagining the future are probably few and far between. But
I think most people
it needs to be done still. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Because you're also sick
You'll
of it.
be there in 20 years.
Don't say that.
Don't say that. I am hopeful. I am. About what you had said before about the lack of work ethic, I do think that, I can see that 1,000%. And I see it in some of my peers, and it sucks. Personally, I would like to believe that I was raised differently and by old-fashioned parents who, you know, taught me to have work ethic. I've worked since I was legally allowed to. Mm-hmm. I've never been without a job. But I also think that our parents, who would that be, Gen X?
Millennial or Gen X, yeah, it could be the one.
somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah, like my parents were, and their year were the years that they were giving us participation trophies because they didn't want us to get our feelings hurt. Of course we're going to be raised like that and grow up to be this way, you know? Like, I kind of don't know what they were expecting by that, to be like, okay, well, you didn't do as well, but you still get a trophy because I don't want you to feel bad. Of course we're going to grow up and say, well, I should still get a trophy even though I didn't work as hard.
Do you think that breeds a sense of resentment in you that they didn't give you a more authentic experience?
Yes, 1,000%. I don't want to say that I wish I had grown up like them because obviously I don't. But I do wish that they had, I mean, and my parents did, like, but I do wish that more of my peers' parents had pushed them to kind of be better versions of themselves, as opposed to just, oh, it's okay that you can't do this. Like, no, it's like kind of not.
I don't relate to people that are,
No.
It's hard for me to have any amount of patience or tolerance for that, just because same thing as you, right? I've worked and worked and worked, and I know that part of life is bullshit, right? And it's mundane and whatever. And I recognize that, but I think we're like-minded in the sense that, like, it could be different. I don't fall in line, I guess, with some of the other, and we don't with the other Gen Zs that don't want to work or are lazy, because we do have those. We do have a good bunch of those, but clearly.
Well, clearly, yeah, I meant to say, clearly you're different.
Yeah.
I also think that when we see it in other countries working in a different way, that it's like, okay, well, why can't we have that? You know, like, I know it's a worldwide problem, the, you know, job market sucking, but in America it's particularly bad. So I think that seeing other countries kind of at least attempt to fix it is like, okay, well, you know, we just choose not to.
Well, China's really, I don't know if you know what's been happening in China in the past few years. It started off as the Lie Flat movement, and then it became the Let It Rot movement. And it's because there's such a high number of college graduates who aren't finding jobs commensurate with or in some cases any jobs at all, that a percentage of the young population are just completely checking out, you know, going back to live with their parents, just doing kind of gig work once in a while, play video games a lot, because they legitimately tried, they work so hard and not finding those opportunities. A large percentage is like, well, this is all bullshit, what did I do any of this for? And so it's interesting to know if that phenomena in China is a harbinger of things to happen elsewhere, or that's just something very unique to especially the really weird thing that happened with the one-child policy in China, how that really impacted, you know, what's happening there.
So it's like, not only are they giving up on their jobs, but they're giving up on their aspirations.
Yeah, completely, yeah. And it's this whole movement called, and it was originally Lie Flat, and then it sort of devolved into this whole other thing. There's actually some ancient Chinese character that this is based on, but Let It Rot is just completely checking out from the whole, you know, enterprise of trying to succeed and trying to build a career of any kind.
It's interesting that they use that phrase as if let it rot, like let society rot, let the entire structure rot.
Yeah, like I will not be a party to trying to prop up a system which is obviously not going to work for me, so I'm just going to check out.
Fair.
You think that
Completely
resonates?
fair. Yeah. I get it. Like, I would generally try not to let it rot, but I see why they would. Like, I can completely understand that and resonate with that. It's amazing that suicide rates aren't higher. I mean, they're extremely high, but it's like, it's crazy. I mean, what are people supposed to do? My parents are always like, oh, this person's 27 years old and lives with their parents. What are they supposed to do? You know, like,
well, it's tough when salaries haven't gone up.
Right.
very
And
much.
houses are overpriced.
Yeah, housing shortage. Yeah, exactly.
We're
all
not
sorts of
set
things.
up to succeed.
no.
We're not. I mean, I live paycheck to paycheck, and oftentimes I am struggling still, right? Like, because I did go to college, that's part of it, right? And rent and bills and all of that stuff. But I wouldn't have the ability to, like, move back in with parents, right? Like, it's a struggle, and you make it on your own, and you got to do it and whatever. But it doesn't feel like I'm working to have a great retirement or any sort of, you know, the things that I was promised once, or that our parents had, or my older relatives had. Like, I don't really know what I'm working towards sometimes.
We grew up being told, if you go to college, you won't have to worry about money. You won't have to, you know, live paycheck to paycheck. Living paycheck to paycheck is something that blue-collar jobs do, or people who don't work, or people who didn't go to college and they don't have a path in life. We were always told that college was a promise for a good future, and it's just I don't think it was a lie, but it just isn't amounting to what it was supposed to be.
I think that idea is probably part of the reason why we see a decline in college enrollment these days. Is a lot of people are deciding against college in favor of other avenues of work. And I think it's hard to argue with that, right? Especially if you come out with debt, right? That's a huge hurdle to overcome. I was paying off debt, student loan debt, for something like 10 years afterwards, and it was extremely relieving when I finally didn't have that hanging over my head. And I was fairly fortunate to come out of a system in California, a state school system, where college tuition was something like my actual tuition bill was something like $2,000 a semester. Right? I mean, I had
You
living
didn't have
expenses.
to rub it in.
Well,
I know.
It's
I feel bad
Yeah.
not saying that. But, yeah.
What was your tuition bill for your last year of college?
Probably about 32,000.
With housing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so my
Yeah.
my living expenses
still.
were
Yeah.
subsidized. I was off
Yeah.
campus, but still.
Well, then factoring in, trying to put it all together, you talked about all these benefits you got from college and enjoyment of learning and wanting to be a teacher and being a college, going to college is a major path of that. But then all this crippling debt and you're just basically making ends meet. Would you say college was still worth it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's issues that are just for that, right? Just for higher ed. And then I think that there's the world that we live in now, which is really the issue to me. I would go to college again. I mean, I wanted to get another degree, but I can't afford doing that. So I can't go back to school, even if I wanted to. I even taking the biology classes, right? Or statistics. Like, I would do it again. And I would tell younger me to keep and stick with it too. Like, I am grateful for the privilege that I had to do that. But I think that the system is flawed and needs to be fixed. Do I have the answers? No. But I'm grateful for the opportunity that I had to do that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, when I was a freshman, this was the first time I was ever away from my parents, and I wanted to drop out after the first semester. I was like, I'm done. I don't want to do it anymore. And it was the best decision I ever made in my life to stay. Like, I've had the best 4 years here, truthfully. And yes, everything has its flaws. The system has its flaws. The country has its flaws. Higher ed has its flaws. Each department has their own flaws. But at the end of the day, like, this was the best thing that I could have ever done for myself. And I would do it a million times over if I could. If I could afford it.
Well, it's been a pleasure to have you here on Curious and Unqualified tonight.
It's been a pleasure having you, and pleasure to have you as students and to see this arc, this trajectory of your lives. How, despite all the very real and honest bleakness we're all encountering, you're still finding ways to enjoy life and enjoy learning and enjoy relationships and muddling all through as best we can.
Well, yes, thank you both
Yeah,
for
thank
having
you.
us, and thank you, Jeremy, for being a great professor to both of us.
Yeah, we're really lucky.
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
Indeed. Well, thank you everyone for listening. If you have any comments about this show or others, please drop a note in the comments section.
All right. Good night, all.